Hello, everybody. Welcome. We are beginning our last episode of Every Story Begins with a Sketch with our friend Travis Blaise, aka Sketch to Animate. As I said, this is the last of our three-part series. We gave our characters personality last time, and hopefully this time we'll bring them to life. Thank you for joining us. We're also on Facebook. Send your questions over there. I'm your moderator, Elizabeth Garcia. We will be with Travis for about 2 hours. We will be doing Q&A throughout the session. Please use the Q&A function on Zoom or send us your questions via Facebook and my team will read them to me. We will be uploading this recorded session on YouTube later today for your viewing. For those of you watching us in North America, we have 5% off all Wacom products on our e-store using the code TEACHANIMATION. Take advantage of it, get your Christmas gifts. All right, I'm gonna stop sharing. Hello, Travis, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. This is the last one, huh?
It's the last one, can you believe it?
Yes, I've been having fun. This has been great. I hope everyone's been enjoying this.
Me too. I hope everybody's been learning. I've been learning a lot. Hello, everybody. Where are you guys watching from? Tell us in the chat. I see somebody from Germany.
Yeah, I'm seeing 11 people so far in there. I don't know how many people you see. Hello from Canada, Michigan, Maryland. Wow, California.
España.
Spain.
Hello from Spain.
Hey.
Welcome from Honduras, Indiana. So awesome.
Arizona, Memphis, Ecuador. Oh, we got Ecuador. That's awesome. Portugal, Indonesia. Wow.
Brazil,
New Zealand.
Such an amazing.
Man, it must be early in New Zealand right now.
Simon, what time is it in New Zealand?
All I know is when I do, they're just waking up. Colombia. There
Hola,
you go.
Colombia.
Oh, wow. Look at this.
Well,
we got
awesome.
New Mexico.
I'm so happy for you guys to be joining us. Travis has a very nice lecture today. We're going to continue where we left off, as you remember from last time. If you don't remember, I will be sharing the link to last week's episode here in the chat so that you can watch it later. But last week we started developing characters. Isn't that right, Travis?
Yeah, last week we started developing characters. I don't know. Is there a way that we can should I share it on my end here or?
Yeah, why don't you show, because Travis was working really late last week, and I don't know that people saw the ultimate result because
I posted so on my social media. I got caught up with, I always get caught up in the whole moment of design and story. And this is why I love working with groups and with you guys online, because this isn't just about me teaching you guys. This is about a collaboration of how you can develop a story together. And it would be awesome that at some point, if you guys have looked at my Discord, we have a thing like collaboration where people can collaborate on ideas together. But I just before I go, I wanted to just get an email that I got from my friend Pamela Matthews, who's been watching this webinar. And so I want to say, hey, Pamela, if you're out there. Pamela was a coworker. Her and I were colleagues at Disney way back in the day. And she became this amazing story teacher over at DigiPen. And so her and I always collaborated when I was teaching over there. We were like the story duo. And she's the queen of puns. And so she sent me a little message and I just wanted to read it. She says, hello, I was able to catch your webinar. That was last week. Very fun. I enjoyed it. I hope to watch the next one. And then she goes, a couple of thoughts. She always likes to lead. A couple of ideas. And then she says, for the bird, why don't you call him Macaulay? Like Macaulay Culkin? Get it?
Yes.
Macaulay. And then for the bat and raccoon, remember I was talking about the bat and raccoon story that I did for I was doing traditional animation, and I posted some of that. She goes, why not? How about the story for that is the bat is hired by the ski resort as SAR, the bat and the raccoon. They're both hired at the ski resort and we call it SAR, search and rescue. But in this case, it's sonar and recon. So the bat's called sonar and the raccoon's called recon. And I just thought that was awesome. And she was the one that put the note about the birds and turtles having a common ancestor. So that was also my good friend who, remember that comment?
I do remember it, and I was impressed at the research. That's amazing. They do come
from. But I had to fact check her, and she was right.
She was right. It's incredible.
She was totally right. It's funny. I commented with Aaron about it afterwards, and I said, "Aaron, did you know birds and have a common ancestor?" He goes, "Really?" And he goes, "Let me guess. It's about 260 million years ago." Or no, he said he says probably about 250 million years ago. And I looked up, and I go, 260 million.
Wow.
He goes, I told you.
It's so bizarre because, you know, I guess they do have similar faces, but I don't know. I can't picture it.
There is a commonality in their DNA that goes way back there. There's a split. But you find as you research animals, quadrupeds and bipedal animals, primates versus predatorial, like, you know, cats versus horses, antelopes, or frogs versus turtles, and you'll start to find commonalities and things. And this is the great part of like developing story and researching. I always talk about researching whatever you're doing, like the macaw or like the box turtle. The more you get to know these things, the better you can start incorporating that into your story. So the last time that we left, we were just diving into storyboard. And so what I want to take the time to do today is kind of talk about, I'll share with you some of the images that I created for our characters. And then we'll dive into just talking a little bit about storyboarding, and what that next phase looks like. And then I want to quickly go into bouncing ball and the flour sack. And now this is for educators, people that are trying to teach us. And this is also going to apply for all of you out there that are beginners that are trying to learn animation. And so I'll talk about those two principles, the basic principles that we always hear about, the bouncy ball and flour sack, and why that matters. So first, let me go ahead and open up the images that I did for the, let's see here. I posted them. Where are they? Right there. So you can see my screen, correct? Am I sharing or no? Am I not sharing?
Not yet. It's coming.
Okay, let me go ahead and share my screen really fast. That looks good. And if we have time today, I will basically, like I like to do a lot, is I'll animate. I'll animate something live. Typically a lot of my live streams, I'm either drawing a prompt, or I'm like last night I did traditional animation. So the story prompt was to draw an animal. Someone gave me an armadillo, and then someone said, "Can you do the bouncing ball and the flour sack?" So I basically did, in traditional animation, hand drawn, in about 3.5 hours, I animated this 9-second scene of this armadillo rolling in, opening up, looking around, jumping up, and bouncing off back into a ball. And so I posted that on my social media. I can probably share that with you guys too. If you'd like, I can give that to Elizabeth later and we can put it in the blog. But I thought that was a fun example of how I do those things. But we're gonna try to do, I was thinking, I'll leave it up to Elizabeth of what we can animate, but I was thinking for kicks and giggles, we might be able to maybe animate a little bit of the bird, but that might be a little complicated, but we'll see. So here is one of the first initial ones. So I got really excited about this, again, collaborating with you guys with what this character is. And I created, can you see this okay?
Yes, we see it.
Okay, I'm gonna make this a little bit bigger so we can kind of scroll through everything. So this was the first one that I did. And, you know, trying to figure out that whole suit idea. And then the idea with the suction cups was pretty awesome idea. And I showed this to my brother, and my brother goes, man, I'd love to see that thing animated. And then I went down and I started doing some head turns and some just variations of what we could do. And again, this is based on just our prompt of what we talked about during our webinar. So this is, you know, for me, this is how quickly I'll go into something. You know, first I like to sketch out an idea, then start to build the story, draw the character a little bit more, and then do that story exercise that we discussed with in the first part of this webinar.
Okay.
And then from there, we go into beat boards and storyboards and then thumbnailing and all of that good stuff before we go into our final thing, which is animation. But during that process, it's important to figure out what your character looks like in relationship to your story. So again, I felt like I got inspired to create our two main characters. I only drew one box turtle, and this is it. This is an ornate box turtle that I drew, kind of semi-realistic, cartoonish. The same with the macaw. But I thought this was a fun example of Tyson and Winger. Remember we talked about Winger, you know, he's just winging it. He wants to fly. I didn't put the tattoos or the stickers of the wings on him. I just left that out for now. But that suit, every time I see this, you look at the macaw and you go, did he lose all his feathers? And then you look up and you see that it's not, that he's actually, it's like you don't see it at first, and then you realize, oh wait, he's in a costume. And then you're like, why? why is he in this costume? It invokes curiosity. And then I decided, why not, instead of suction cups, why not plungers? I thought maybe he can walk around with plungers. You know, he's holding onto it like a stick. And he's just, and then this is him getting annoyed by Winger, who's floating around him or her, them. And the next shot is, of course, him suction cupping.
I really like the plungers, Travis. I think that it's an evolution of the suction cups. I like the plungers more.
Well, this is the thing. As you create, and you'll notice this, and you have to, during the research and development process of whatever story you're creating, allow this imagination to open yourself up to more ideas. You know, this is the part that where we get to have fun. See, I'm taking an idea. It's not changing the idea, but it's elevating it. And this is a term that we call meet it or beat it. Aaron used to teach us when we were on a story team working on feature films. If a story is at a certain level, you know, let's say like we're creating a prop that's important for the storytelling of this macaw, but we go, and in this case I go, well, not instead of suction cups, why not we make them plungers? Well, what the plunger does is it elevates the level of gag opportunities and storytelling opportunities that we didn't have before, while still maintaining the overall structure of what the idea is. And the meet it or beat it policy that we refer to is, if you can take a concept that is not quite working, but it's there in the story structure, if you can beat that while still maintaining the theme or the story direction, that's where we want you to be as a story artist. We want you to meet it or beat it. And the meet it is, if we can't come to and this is also a way to, like, when you work with a team of artists and you can't resolve an issue with the story, you look at that part and you go, well, can we beat this, or should we just leave it alone? And then a lot of times we go, leave it alone, let's move on to the next thing. And what that does is it stops the arguing and the discussion, and it keeps moving forward. So we're not stuck in turning in circles around the same issue that we can't come to resolution. And sometimes later on, when we're plugging other holes into the story, that one section that you could not figure out might resolve itself, or brings you back to that idea that will then, you got a new idea because of the other thing that you fixed later on. Do you see how that works?
Yeah.
Does that make sense, Elizabeth, to you?
It makes sense to me. What about you guys? Tell us in the chat. I think it makes perfect sense.
So again, these ideas were based on our discussion from what we had talked about, and I just had a lot of fun with it. And then when I showed it to my brother, he was like, "This is great. This is awesome." And I just kept going with it, especially with the plunger idea.
I like the
just
plunger.
thought,
I really do.
yeah.
I think it takes it further. Somebody here, our friend H Bay, is suggesting maybe adding a zipper to the front of the costume so it can be clear that it's a costume.
Absolutely, we could totally do that. We could totally add a zipper to that. So so let's move forward. Okay, so we've shared this, and if let's talk about the story again. The story itself, we had left it as that it's a love story, it's a romance, it's getting over your fears, overcoming your fears. We know that Tyson is afraid of flying and heights, and Winger is someone who is claustrophobic, doesn't want to be in their shell, isn't comfortable in their shell, which is kind of a nice metaphor for not being comfortable with who you are. And that's who they are. They're not accepting themselves. So there's a lot of that. There's a kind of an underlying theme along with the obvious theme, which is getting over your fears. And then somehow creating a love story that happens in this. But once you've sort of like blocked out the story idea, from that one exercise that we did, you don't necessarily have to write a full-on script. Let's say, for instance, in college, one of the quickest ways to do things, and we did this during the Cartoon Crunch seminar series with Mike Morris, was the goal for them was there was a team of 4 that had to develop. And I encourage you guys to also take a look at the cartoon series, Cartoon Crunch, if you get an opportunity to, because there's a lot of little fun information that was taught in that, but also there's a lot of stuff that the students learned from the beginning of the week to the end of the week that they didn't know before. And they had the experience of being together, not knowing each other, and then having to develop a story together as a crew, literally not knowing who they were before, and then having to develop a bond to create the story within 1 week. So one of the things that the parameters was no dialogue. So in the situation, for the example of, remember the On Nuts story we talked about that I had developed in class using the Ken Adams story spine, the same thing applies to this. We could then take that outline from the 8 beats, whatever those things are. If you did the practice and you actually execute it and you have your own story, and you want to incorporate what we have here today into that story, by all means do it. But you don't have to use dialogue. This is the part where we make executive decisions. Do you want to write a full-on script with dialogue, or can you tell the story without dialogue? So for beginners, and not even beginners, even for professionals, one of the ways to kind of ease you into storytelling, especially visual storytelling, is creating stories without words. Silent films, that's what we did in the beginning. Before, when film was created, we didn't have the means to create audio capabilities. So they created silent films with subtitles. Watch some of those. Those are some of the most amazing films in cinematic history that you should be watching today. And I think those things apply to the idea of storytelling in a visual format. We got to go back to our heritage, go back to the original people who started and pioneered storytelling through film and visual boards. So we could take this and make it a silent film, kind of like what I did with On Nuts. I decided I wanted On Nuts to be a narrative, meaning there wasn't going to be voiceover for the characters, but there were going to be someone narrating like a kind of telling a story like Paul Bunyan, like a folk tale, but in a song. So I want to create a song that's sort of a folk song to the Nuts while the story is playing out. With you guys, same thing. You can create a short film with just music and sound effects and call it a day. And that could be a wonderful piece. And I actually would challenge you guys to do that, to not use dialogue at all. Rely on your visual storytelling skills to tell the story of Tyson and Winger, who are in space on a moon base, and whatever arise during that situation, and having them come together. Do it all in visual forms, in visual boards without words. So let's see here. I'm going to open up. I'm going to open up for questions before I dive in. So Elizabeth, if there's any questions while I'm going to the next thing, just let me know.
Yes, I also want to remind people I have shared, I wrote a summary blog with all of Travis's highlights from the first class and the second class. I shared it in the chat, and it's also on Facebook for you to find it, so you can catch up and see exactly where we left off. And I also shared the Cartoon Crunch series that Travis just made reference here. It's a really nice example of how these two teams put together a silent story. It has no script, but in a minute, they tell a little story, and it's really nice. Mike Morris and a group of other storytellers, including Travis, helped the students do it. It's a really fun series. Please watch it. And some questions here. We have
Sure.
Jaime Carrillo is wondering if you're ever gonna do classes like this with your brother Aaron together, or if you have already.
Well, we are going to be developing a tutorial, a big tutorial on how to develop and pitch an animated concept, an animated TV show or an animated short. We're going to develop a whole thing from building the script, going through the process of developing the idea, developing the series, and then moving on to building it as an animatic. And then how would you go about pitching that? And so we're going to build, that would be the big tutorial in the new year. For Sketch to Animate, I think we've been going back and forth. I think what we want to do is do a whole curriculum on what we're doing now, like taking this webinar that we have that you see, but really breaking it down into a course series where we can take you through step by step on how to build your story chops up, and then dive into the basics of storyboarding, and then going into the more advanced levels of storyboarding, and then finalizing it with, you know, taking a script and boarding it out. So for Sketch to Animate, that's one of the things that we want to dive into. We're going to do little pieces of that, and then put them on our storefront, which is going to launch in the beginning of the year or sometime in January. And then with Aaron, we still have to pick a date, but we are slated to, it's all on me right now to do that kind of thing. So if that's something you guys are interested in, please let me know, or shoot me an email, and let me know if that's something that you guys like. Because I am just starting out as a brand with Sketch to Animate and what I'm trying to do, we're really open to making sure that what we put out there is something that people want. When we go to, you know, because you're going to be selling, you know, you're going to be buying a product from me. I want to make sure that I'm giving you everything that you need in order to kind of be educational and beneficial for your artistic growth. So back to the story. So when we're talking about story now, we've talked about making it a silent film. One of the things is I'm going to tell to you guys, make this, I would say, for the story challenge. Let's see, I'll make this challenge.
And you guys, for those of you who just joined and don't know, I believe Travis is using TV Paint right now. He also uses Harmony to move.
Yep, I'm going to be doing an animation test in Harmony today.
But this one, what you're seeing right now, Laura, it's TV Paint, and Travis loves it.
Yeah, it's TV Paint. And I also use for the iPad, I use Calipeg. Um, there are other programs that you can use. And I'm working right now on a 21-inch Cintiq. That's the, if you went to part 1, you could see the kind of my list of computers and software equipment and stuff that I go through.
Yes,
and that's also in the blog. Yep.
All of
so
here.
So I just want to recap for the story challenge. Use the Can-Anim Story Spine to do your exercise. Then to decide, we're developing the character. Develop the character. I'll just do character for short. That means drawing it like what I showed you. Then we go in, finalize. As you're developing your boards, or I'm sorry, your character and your story, you're trying to finalize what the overall story is and finalize your outline. I call it the outline. And in this case, we're going to make this, the challenge is a silent short film. That's the challenge, without words. We want to make this short, whatever you're going to do, a silent film, something without. And one of the things that I like to do is research. If you're a teacher, get them to research silent movies. Research silent movies. And there's plenty of them out there. From Buster Keaton to, my brain's going blank. Throw me some silent film actors you might know, guys. Some famous ones. Elizabeth?
Some silent film characters, the Pink Panther.
Or well, okay, but like live action silent films.
Charlie Chaplin.
Yep.
Help me, chat. Dr.
And then
Caligari, the cabinet of Dr. Caligari, Abbott and Costello.
There you go. That's good. And then also animated short films.
What about animated short films? Let's see, guys. Tom and Jerry. Yes, I used to love Tom and Jerry. The Roadrunner.
I'm gonna tell you here. We'll just continue. Let's see. Betty Boop. There's also if you look at
Piper, Fantasia, Mickey Mouse.
Look at any of the Annecy film festivals. Annecy film festivals. They have some of the best, and it's one of the oldest film festivals in the world for animation. And Goblin is a school that is one of the best for focusing on traditional animation or just animation in general. And they have some fantastic shorts. And one of the things that you want to do when you're, and of course, Pixar is the king of short films, right? They always have their shorts in the beginning of their films. And typically they do them without words. Those are some of the classic ones to look at as well. And I would also challenge you guys to then use that story spine to even break down and analyze what those short films are in terms of their key component beats, their story beats based on the Can-Anim story spine. The more you do that, the better you're going to start to recognize story and story structure that you can then apply to your own short film that you're doing currently. So once you do that, you create your final outline. And I think I showed this to you guys before. Let me make sure I have it in here. Yep, there it is. So, and I showed you this before. This is actually my final, this was before my final outline that I had showed last week for the story on Nuts short. And I broke it down into the story spine itself. But for the most part, if you took out the until finally and then the and ever since that day, I would have my script outline. So the script outline, I like to call, is without words. It's just mostly describing what's happening, the actions that are happening. And then based on this, I'm actually going to start boarding stuff out. And I will give you an example of that in a second. But what we're going to do is, once we've gotten this outline that I have, that I've shown you here, we're going to then move forward. Let's say we've created the outline and we're ready to move forward with storyboarding. The big question is, well, now that we've gotten the story written and we've gotten our characters blocked out, and we've gotten some, we also talked about beat boards, where we do some sort of loose visual beat boards of each moment. And I gave you those exercises to do like 3 or 4 visual beats per, or visual boards per beat of the Cat Adam story spine. Then from there, we want to start blocking out our project, our short film. But what do you do? How do you take this information that we've already shared, and then we apply it to now actually making this film happen? Well, the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to have a script, right? And we're going to have our rough model sheets.
Now, Travis, while you're going into something interesting here that requires a lot of distilling information, and I have a question here on Facebook that resonates with that. You know, do you have any tips for someone who's indecisive? For example, not being able to settle on key plot points or characters without second opinions. By the time you start to develop the outline, you're going to have to make decisions. So what kind of tips do you have for indecisive creatives?
And this is where teams come into play. You know, if you're good about making decisions on your own, even if you're good about making decisions on your own, I guarantee every writer, every artist, every person has someone they look to that they appreciate and will give them like no holds barred opinions about where they are and decisions that they should make. Now, it's always going to be up to you, the artist, to make the final decision on what you want to do. But when you create these shorts and you're working with a team, the idea is you're working together collectively. And if your wheels are spinning and you can't decide on something, bounce your idea off of someone who will give you an objective opinion, an honest opinion. And in critiquing something, I always talk about this. When you critique in a way that you'll use the whole meter or beat it policy. If you don't like something, don't say I don't like it. Like, that sucks. Why? Why does it suck? Why does it not work? Give me reasons why. Because critiquing of something without merit is just words. And if you do not come with a positive reinforcement to, you know, I don't like this. However, I think if you want to elevate the story this way, maybe this might be a good idea for this direction. What do you think? Those are you know, when someone approaches you like that, then that's going to be a really good way to kind of start the talk or discussion about elevating your story. So I always like to work with teams. I always have people like Pamela Matthews, who, even though we're not together right now and I'm not teaching at that school, boom, she sends me an email saying, hey, I got this idea, because she knows me. She knows that I love her ideas, and she knows that I understand when she's critiquing something, where she's coming from with that. So we have that relationship. And it was brilliant. I love that, the fact that she sent me that cold email like that. You need people like that in your life that's going to help you to get better as a storyteller. So you have to, if you don't have anyone, give yourself a deadline. You know, say I have 3 days to make a final decision. After those 3 days, if I have not, move forward with whatever you have currently and commit to it. part of our indecisiveness as artists, which I am very much one of those people, is that we, if given given to our own demise, we will, or our own collective decision making, we will procrastinate until the ends of the earth and never get anything done. Hence, I do the same thing. I have 20 different projects that I'm developing, and each one's a shiny new object to me, but I have to stay focused to finish out and do the things that I've already said I would set out to do. Like on Nuts, I'm committed to that script. I had someone read it. I had someone copy edit it. I pitched it back to everyone. I got all their feedback. Now I'm ready to board it. Done. If you don't have that, give yourself a definite timeline in order to make decisions, because we all have to have timelines. Otherwise, we'll never get things finished. So that's going to be, I think, the best way to approach that indecisiveness. But if you have someone, which I hope you do, by all means, find that person and bounce that idea off of. Does that, Elizabeth? That's a pretty long answer to the question, but I think that was a relevant thing to bring up.
Yeah, thank you guys. Thank you on Facebook for tuning in. It is an important question. I'm very undecisive. I can't decide, and I always use peers to help me. Oscar Moreno says that was the Chuck Jones theory of critique also. Are you familiar with Chuck Jones?
Oh gosh, yes. But I did not know that was his theory. But I think it's pretty funny that that's a common conclusion that a lot of artists come to over time. And my knowledge that I'm sharing with you is my own personal experience from the last 30 years. And even before that, from the time that I was a child to now, being around someone like Aaron, who is this epic talent of an artist, and then growing up around him and also going in the same industry, there were certain things that we learned about work ethics and how we approach things and how we work with others. And I think I really learned a lot when I started teaching, because then I really started to have to think about how people take in information and how I deliver the information for them to understand it. So I want to say lock it in the script. So we're at that point. We're locking it in. We have the rough model sheets. Now we're ready to start storyboarding. But what do we do? Like, where do we start from there? Well, we have our beat boards, right? If we are watching the series, I talked about beat boards. I've sent you a link on what beat boards are. So you should have a link on that. It's going to be on the blog. We're going to have beat boards, visual beat boards for each story beat, whether it's 4 or 5 or 1.
I'll be sharing the keyboard link in the chat in a second for everybody.
And what that story beat means is, once upon a time, there was this moon base on the moon, and there was an astronaut who brought along who was there for a couple months on a month-long mission on the moon base, and he brought along his pet Macaulay, and or Tyson, and his pet turtle, Winger. And every day, we talked about every day they would be, while the astronaut was doing his experiments, Winger and Tyson would occupy their time by walking around. And this is where we set up the characters and who they are. And when we talk about the beat boards, of course, I'm talking about loose beat boards that represent the overall idea of what that particular section of the story beat is that you're referring to. So, if you got the bird, and I'm just going to do it in a simple format. If you've got the bird plopping around, each one, and we've got the other character floating around in space, we're essentially going to create these little thumbnail story beat boards that represent a visual representation of what is going on in the story beat. What the visual beat board set up for you is you're setting up camera, layout and location, layout or setting, mood or tone. We're giving a certain mood, a certain tone. Each beat represents a moment, a mood or an emotional beat that happens within the storyline. And so based on these storyboard, these little beat boards, and I like to, when I do my beat boards, of course, I talked about this before, is I like to just do a little simple tone to kind of block him out. And now these are my, this would be a thumbnail beat board. I'm just giving you as a quick example of what is happening in here. So, you know, they're floating around. And so you might have 3 or 4 of these for each one. Well, now that you have that collective amount of beat boards, any locked in script now, and rough model sheets, which is with rough model sheets, you want to have expression sheets. You want to have turnarounds. Again, kind of like what I talked about, what I have here. Let me pull that back up again so you can see it. You know, these would be moments. These are also turnarounds. I got a back view. I've got a 3/4 front view. I got a 3/4 back view, hip and bent down. These are going to be things or situations like expressions. I'm going to have expression sheets of who Tyson is. You know what would be. And if you don't know what to put in your expressions, everything you do in your model sheets always refer back to the story. The story is all that you need in order to tell what's happening with these characters. So if the character in the storyline is angry, we'll do an expression where the character, what does that character look like angry? If the character is in love at some point, what does that moment of being, you know, in love for this? Give that expression in there. Find all of the emotional beats in your story and apply them to your expression sheets for each of your characters. That way it stays in line with what you're trying to get at. And you can always refer to these as you storyboard out your scenes. Does that make sense so far?
It does.
Elizabeth?
Yeah, absolutely. You gotta capture the essence
Yeah,
of the character in every possible situation.
but keep it grounded to the story itself.
Yeah.
That's a great way to yeah, in order to, like, you know, this could be easily incorporated into a story beat. This you know, poses. And on top of turnarounds and expression sheets, do poses of the character that would be in situations for the story. So if you're creating and developing something rough like this, have your script next to you, look at the script, and even as teachers, I would say, if once you have an outline blocked out, have the students go in and if you want to divide and conquer, let's say have 2 students sharing the role of character designing, have them look at the story and point out moments that they think are important to put into the poses for the model sheet. And so these little poses are story moments, if you will. And then the turnaround is just a turnaround, showing you the proportion. And then the one thing that I forgot to mention previously was having a size comp. If you have more than 2 characters, it's nice to have what you see here in your model sheet pack, because what you're doing is you're setting up, what does this character size-wise look like next to, let's say, the turtle next to the bird that we see here? What do those look like? Having this comparison is going to be very, very useful for you when you go in and you're doing your beat boards. So, you know, if my character, like I have here, for instance, if I have a size comparison sheet, let me get out of this, the size comparison sheet where, you know, here's my line, the bird is, you know, X, you know, so many things high, and this is this is what the character looks like on his little suction cups. You know, if I make the character, or let's say I'll have him standing here. If the character is the box turtle, I'll make sure that the box turtle is yay high. And so now I have a comparison to how big these characters are to one another. Now, when I go into my beat boards example over here, you know, I'm not going to have, if my character is standing here talking, to the turtle, I'm not going to have the turtle be this big next to him, because that would just mean he's gargantuan. Does this make sense? Like,
yeah,
absolutely. that would not, without the model sheet, you don't have a reference to how big they are to one another. So really, realistically, that character would be more like.
Somebody commenting on here that you have a great style of drawing, and if you wondering if you're doing character design course soon, just focus on character design.
Yes, I will be. So yeah, the short answer is yes, I will be doing that.
Yes, Sam's going to.
So this would be no, this would be yes, because based on our comparison to one another, we know that this character is too big.
Yeah.
And then we know this is just right. It's like the Three Little Bears. Just right. Just the right size. So that's the importance of having a comparison model sheet next to one another. So now we're ready to go again back into storyboarding.
Travis, before you move on from character,
yes.
Jaime Carrillo is wondering, as a teacher, how long would you give students to complete the expression sheet based on those moments?
Yeah, that's a good one. You know, just based on what we're teaching, you know, you can't give them, it depends on their workload. Like if you're doing an online teaching thing versus they're just doing this and this is all that they're doing, focusing on this as a course. But if you're in high school, or you've got biology, or if you're in college and you've got academics and other classes, you've got to weigh those in to figure out. So I think realistically, if you had a team of, let's say, 2 artists, I think one artist could probably block and build these out in about 2 weeks, 2 solid weeks of work, to kind of, like, for instance, I drew, I was giving parameters on the students at school, but even with the gap of time that I gave them, they were still being stressed because of other projects that they were working on. So it's a really hard thing, because I've always said this type of learning story and learning storyboarding and character designing animation, the whole process of this could be a whole BFA program in itself. Storyboarding itself could be its own BFA. If someone had a college that said, we're going to study BF fine arts in storyboarding, because you're going to be learning every aspect of story writing, character designing, layout design, cinematography, all of those things kind of apply. So give yourself, I would say, a good rough thing for each one of these would be maybe a week to write the story, maybe 2 weeks to develop the layouts and the character designs, model sheets. And then it's always good to have like a partner of 2, at least 2 people working together on stuff like this, because I think it helps each other, and you're teaching them to work together. There's a method to my madness when I get people to go work in groups, because so many artists don't want to work with each other, or they're shy, or they're introverted. This forces them to get out of their bubble, but also forces them to communicate and work positively with one another. So I always say, this is a team effort. It should be taught like a team. And it's good, I guess, in whether they decide later on that they're going to do their own independent film without anyone, that's great. But I think as a structure for education, I think it's very valuable and very important to incorporate the team aspect, the we, not I, to this. The less I and the more we get into this storytelling teaching, the better I think you're going to be when it comes to collaborations and working. Because in production, in the real world of production, even though we're in COVID and we're all insular right now and we're all in our own things, we're still working together as a team. I just got out of a story meeting this morning with my head of story, collaborating on what we need to do to pitch an idea for tomorrow for our directors. And it's great. It's a great process, because we learn how to talk and communicate and build up ideas with each other. So that's a very long-winded answer, but again, I think it's important to talk about those things for the students.
Thank you. Jaime was just sharing that they always have a hard time, estimating how much time to give students to complete each assignment. So I'm glad that you went into detail, and hopefully Jaime is making his students work in groups, because I do believe that leads to better stories.
Yes, and if you want to break it down, it's going to be turnarounds for character. Sorry for my horrible writing. You want to have turnarounds, which is basically a front view of the character, three-quarter,
Eman is sharing with us that the importance of a group is very Eastern perspective and can be seen in Japan's cultural principles in many aspects. Thank you, Eman.
Yeah, it's very, very true. There is no sense of I think in that culture as well. It's definitely a group of a collaborative. I think that's one of the things I do like about a lot of the studio culture that they do there. So, and then of course a back view.
I really like the back view you did for Tyson or Macaulay, yeah, and his butt looks cute in that suit. It looks edible almost. He looks like a turkey.
Well, instead of for Easter, we'll have chocolate covered macaw or Macaulay, instead of a chocolate rabbit. You want to have your expressions, of course. Each one of these, give them. You know what? I would say if one person's doing one of these and you're dividing and conquering, have someone do. This might take them a week to do this. I mean, I can rough it out a lot faster, but that's me. Like, I look at what I do and I think, well, what is reasonable? Like, I animated a 9-second scene, 84 drawings, about 180 frames, or 190 frames, and I did it in 2.5, 3 hours. I literally have it right next to me here. That I animated an armadillo traditionally on paper, straight ahead, but I also planned out the shot and showed people how to do that. Now, I don't expect, somebody asked me the question last night, well, how long do you think that would take someone else? Now, what I just did there might take someone literally, if under production, and let's say I wanted to turn that in, they would give you a week to 2 weeks to rough it out. in actual production if it was traditionally animated at Disney. So there's that parameter. Now, what I can rough out in 3 hours might take someone a week to do. It's all variable. I mean, there are a lot of talented artists out there, and it's not about speed, it's about quality. What is the final output? So you want to gauge yourself in terms of that. So I think a week to do a turnaround is probably reasonable. A week to do expressions and poses, because you're having more fun. This is more technical. The turnaround is more technical, and the size comparison, which is what you're going to do. You're going to do a size comparison based on your turnarounds of each character. So it's kind of like killing two birds with one stone. You're doing the size relationship between two characters, turnarounds, and then you're going to be doing your expressions and model sheets. So I say if you have two characters, give them a week to kind of do a turnaround for each. Let's see the turtles right here. Right, you're gonna do the side. We'll do 3/4 back real quick just to kind of get an idea. Tail, right? And then you're gonna do your comparison, and this is basically copying one of these together and then having the characters.
I know that this is not a, trying to focus on character building, but I have a good question here from Oscar
Sure.
Moreno. With characters without hands, when you are developing these expression boards, can you speak about what to do in the case of the turtle, for instance, without, without hands? How do you achieve a good variety of expressions, having to hold props, hold things like a gesture without hands is a challenge to show variety of gestures. What would you do with a turtle?
Well, with a turtle, what are their attributes? A turtle actually can do a lot of things. A turtle can use their hands to claw at things. They can hold things. They can use their mouth for grappling and things. And so knowing the limitations. Now, of course, if you had a turtle, it depends on the type of show that you're creating. If you had a turtle that, stood up and then, had a hand like this, then obviously he might be able to, however you've designed the hand, you're giving an opposable. Once you give them opposable thumb, then all bets are off. You can grab things, you can do things. If you keep it more realistic, maybe he grabs things with just his claws, like so. Like maybe he's just literally grabbing it like so.
The modified grab, just when you're starting to work out and you can't do the exact move, they teach you a modified move. It's a modified.
Maybe he's just grabbing it like so. Or if he's on all fours, maybe, if he's gnawing on something.
They can grab things with their mouths. Yeah.
Like, you can grab.
Maybe they put Velcro all over their shell and they just roll over stuff and.
That's thinking outside the box. That's all storytelling. That's all part of the storytelling aspect, especially when you're doing a silent film. Everything's visual gags, visual expressions, visual things that are clearly pantomiming. That's why I'm saying looking at silent films are important. We talk about it all the time. When I learned the Disney way of animating, which is what I did when I left art school, that's what we live by. It's not a cliche. It's beneficial. There's a reason why. And that's also why I'm going to lead into the bouncing ball and the flour sack, because everyone always says, why do we need to do that? This is boring. This is lame. Not if you put story to it. Story adds a whole new level to anything that might be mundane and boring. And when you do, and when you got the challenge like him, where he doesn't have opposable thumb, but he's trying to hold something in place, there, who's to say that he couldn't hold it like so? Let me make sure that I've got, put this down below it. And now he's biting onto something. Interesting. And we're using the limitations that we've applied to the story. You know, again, everything goes back to story. What dictates the story? The rules of engagement, the rules of storytelling is all depending on what you set in place for the character. So the character is always going to be, there's a really good example, and I forget the, Chuck Jones, you know, when they had the artist drawing, do you guys ever remember that short where the artist is drawing Daffy Duck, and then he starts to change Daffy Duck's appearance, and he's erasing it, and the Daffy Duck says, "Hey, stop doing that." The short, Elizabeth, do you know what I'm talking about at all?
Yes, I do.
I can't remember the name of it, but the whole point of that story is to express that we as animators can do whatever we want in the cartoon world, and B, it's always going to be according to what is funny and what helps elevate the story. Now, him doing all these little bits was elevating little story gag moments for him, but it's giving you the rules. The story sets the rules for the characters, and whatever happens within the story, that's what you do with the character. So that is the whole point of what I'm talking about here with the limitation of a turtle. It's all on you as an artist, but it all comes down to, if you want a bipedal anthropomorphic turtle walking around in space with you know, being more human, so be it. That's what you write in your story, and that's okay. If you decide that you want, like I did, a more realistic character that is a real turtle, but is more he has a personality, because we've kind of humanized them in a way. Well, all animals have personalities. Then I limit myself to how he does things. So I have to think creatively as a visual storyteller, what situations I'm going to put him in to make him funny. Like how do we make him afraid of being in a shell? We talked about this last week. How, does he sleep, does he sleep with his head out? Because a lot of times turtles like to go in their shells and fall asleep. Or he's never in a shell. Like if he gets, maybe we put him in a visual gag where a scary situation happens and he doesn't want to go into a shell, but so he's doing everything to avoid that. That's a tricky part. That's a challenging. I think that's even harder to do than illustrating the point of the bird not wanting to fly. I think we could easily do a lot of visual gags that illustrate that point than as opposed to the turtle that doesn't want to go into his shell because he's claustrophobic. But that gives you a story challenge to figure out what you can do with this character.
So they're telling us that the short you were mentioning, Selena, Oscar, and Marco say it's called Duck Amok.
Oh, Duck Amok. Yep, Duck Amok. Duck Amok is brilliant.
Yes.
Duck Amok is really, really cool. So, like I said,
we can, maybe the shell of the turtle has a lot of scars because the turtle has been trying to get rid of it. That she's jumped off cliffs and stuff, trying to break her shell.
Well, maybe I can guarantee you, if Pamela was listening in, she would probably have about 5 or 6 different ideas to share.
I know. Well, Pamela, where are you? But I think I would just show a super, like, when you're learning to drive, that your first car is full of, scratches and its original shape is all gone. I think we should have like a very misshaped shell, because She hates her shell. She's hitting it all over. That's what I think.
Okay.
I don't
No,
know.
no, that's, I think all that stuff's great. So getting back to the context of what we're trying to teach here today is when you do turnarounds, give it yourself, this is going back to the teacher, give about a week. When you're doing expressions and poses for the character, you know, give that another week. So again, a week for each portion of this particular assignment that you want to do for poses and expressions. So 1 week. And you know, excuse me, because when I get into concepts, I quickly draw stuff down to kind of visualize and so you understand a little bit better. You know, maybe I can organize this a little bit better later on, but hopefully that answers the question for that. Now, again, the big thing is once we go into, now we're ready to storyboard. We've got characters, we've got layout. Oh, also your beat boards will also help you with your layouts. You're going to want to have probably a week's worth of developing the layouts, the environment, the moon base, the location. How many locations are there? Your script is going to tell you everything. As a teacher, you might want them to list out, once they've written the story, list out their assets, give them an assets list. If there is a character, how many are there? And then they do those designs that I've said, poses. If there's props, draw the props. If there are layouts or locations, how many are there? How many locations do we have? And then do at least one image of each location. My recommendation is to limit your locations like we did the setting. We limit it to a moon base. You'll probably have it, you could probably, depending on what you write in the climax of the story, you might have an exterior of the moon base. You might have them outside in an obscure location. But if it's mostly going on inside, try to keep it contained within one area, maybe no more than 2 or 3 locations for the short. The more locations you have, unless it's like, let's say, a montage of gags that's illustrating a point, the less is more concept is what I like to say when you're just starting out. Keeping it simple. Once we have the KISS method. Someone said, keep it simple, silly. I would say keep it simple, stupid. That's my brother. We would say that to each other. But keeping it simple, silly is a more of a politically correct way of saying, don't overcomplicate yourself. Really, really try to keep it minimal. Can you tell a story in one location? Can you tell a story in one location with one character? Can you tell what can you do with 2 locations and 2 characters, or 2 locations or with 2 characters, or 3 characters in one location? It's all up to you, but keep it limited because the whole focus is telling a good story, not overcomplicating it with more characters. One of the biggest kisses of death for many people is like, they can't solve a story. So what do? They add another character. Why? You're just going to make it even worse. One character isn't going to resolve the overall underlying story. So it's important to kind of keep those things in mind. So when you want to start storyboarding, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to have your script, you're going to have your expressions, and you're going to have your model sheet or your beat boards. And now the first thing you're going to do is, and your location layouts, you're going to start thumbnailing. Now, I have a good example of this where if you want to, if I have time today, I'm going to go into a live stream where I'm going to be developing ARC. I didn't do it last week because we went over longer the last time before, but I'm developing an ongoing series on my own independently, and I'm going through the process of thumbnailing. This is the first phase, and because I'm doing it live, it's taking a while to do it because I am literally not doing it any other time but during my live streams. So I'm going through every section of my script, and I'm thumbnailing out each section. Now I'm going to backtrack one little thing. The thumbnailing portion of this is like beat boards, but you're keeping it simple. So if we're saying, you know, I like to break them up into little thumbnails like this. And I literally might have a little, you know, this character comes in and he's looking over at maybe the Macaulay,
Macaulay.
I can't, Macaulay, you know, who's over, you know, in the corner, and maybe, you know, I have this kind of thing, and I'm literally, and it's a, you know, what I'm doing now for thumbnailing is I'm setting the rhythm to my overall camera. So there's a whole nother thing that we could go a whole 5-6 part series on just storyboarding alone, but I'm just going to give you the general synopsis. Thumbnailing helps you define your camera flow, your rhythm, based on what the story is. And with the better you thumbnail out and block out your scene, your scenes or shots in your story, the better off you're going to be when you're going into your boards, because this is a quick way to realize whether you are working, whether your scene flow or your camera flow is working or not. Because we can easily get ourselves in corners when we're boarding straight ahead and we're just not planning for it. We could easily literally box ourselves in the corner and not how to get out of it, and then have to backtrack and reboard everything because our camera started one place, and because we didn't plan for it, it ended up somewhere else and we didn't know where to go with it. So it's important to do the thumbnails first. And again, thumbnails are no more than showing a grid, showing your eye level, where you are. Is it a down shot? Is it an up shot? Is it a Dutch angle? Is it an American shot? Is it extreme close up? You know, are we going in really tight on the character? Or are we going really far away with the character? You know, this is, you know, a close up. This is a wide shot or a medium, you know, this is a wide, this could be maybe a little bit of a wide shot. But I'm thumbnailing. The idea is you're thumbnailing out, and very simple. You see how quickly I drew these? It's the silhouettes are there, the staging is there, where they are in conjunction with one another, the spatial references, all of that is mapped out in a very simple format. When I do a layout, or if there's an object behind them and I want to show that there's a perspective, I will indicate my perspective lines in here just to kind of illustrate where they are and how they look and what angle we're going at. Like so. If it's an upshot, I might do a quick grid like this, and I might have the character, let's say the character, the guy is floating, and we have the other character kind of looking up at him.
Travis, I think I have the story. I have it. I just imagined it. The turtle she's done with her turtle life. She doesn't want to have the shell. She's going to jump off the cliff, right? But also, well, I don't know about the jumping off the cliff because we're in the moon, so she can't really fall. But this turtle is done with life, and there's going to be a point in the story where she's falling, and Tyson or Macaulay is going to have to take off his suit to fly and rescue her. He's going to have to face his fear to rescue this turtle falling, because Laurel just told me that shell.
So you figured out the
Shell
you figured out the
damage
climax.
Turtle. Yes, I think so. I think that the climax is for this turtle. Tyson is going to have to face his fear and fly for her. But the moon setting is in the way, because you can't really fly in the moon, can you?
Well, there's again, the middle part, the building of the story is going to be your challenge. If you figure out your ending and your beginning and you have the right theme, the middle part is always going to be the hardest thing to figure out. And this is where the team effort comes in, because bouncing ideas like we're doing now is exactly the whole point of this exercise and what I'm trying to teach. And how important this part of this story building is. excuse me. So I love that idea, by the way, Elizabeth. I think it's great. And I think we should roll with something with that. But again, thumbnailing is key and crucial. Keeping it simple, no more than stick figures, as long as the silhouettes are clear and what they are. And the only way you can get to the thumbnails is by having practice drawing the characters in their model sheets. Once you've gotten comfortable, I call it, you want to try to find a shorthand to drawing your developed model sheets. You can have rough model sheets for storyboards, and that's it. You don't have to have the final polished clean lines, because you're just wanting to get clear silhouettes, clear size comparison, so that you can use the shape language in your boards. And then you're going to find the short form to your characters for boarding purposes. And again, thumbnailing is simple. You can use a simple tone, just a light gray, medium gray, to kind of pop the characters in and out, using the grids to kind of show the angle. If it's let's say a Dutch angle is a tilted camera. You see a lot of it in action shots. A lot of anime does this, where the character is running towards camera.
So
Like
we have a guest, Glue Blue, who says he can't see your screen share. Glue, please make sure you're not pinning Travis's camera view, because then you're only gonna see him.
You're only gonna see me.
Yes, he's sharing his screen, so make sure that you're not pinning his face, because then you won't see his screen. And
Yes.
since you're talking about thumbnailing, I have a question from Jay Seltman. How do you go about designing composition, your thumbnails? I find I get overwhelmed quickly by making the composition good and relevant to the plot. Composition in thumbnails.
Composition and thumbnails. Well, I mean, again, what I'm doing now. So, okay, let's take it back a couple of steps. You have a script. For instance, you have the story on Nuts. The first thing you want to do is break this down. Before you do your thumbnails, and this is something I skipped over, break your thumbnail or your outline into sections that would be considered sequences, little chunks that you can easily manage and break apart, that you can board each section. And do it in random. Like, we break our scripts into sequences, and there may be many hundreds of sequences within a feature film. There may be 20 sequences or 10 sequences in a short film. In this one, there might be just 8, sequences. For the premise, it might break it up. I always like to, if a story event changes, then it breaks into a new sequence. If an emotional beat changes, or a location shot changes, that could be an indication of a new sequence to break it apart for a new set of boards. But there's also the hookup portions too, right? That sequence that you've broken up, that you might board out, needs to hook into the next sequence. So you need to make sure that there's a nice hookup, whether it's a cross dissolve or a cut in action into the next sequence. You need to resolve that and make sure that that's clear. Once you've broken those down in numerical order, your sections, that's when you can start thumbnailing out each section one at a time. Like I said, when you do your beat boards, you're beat boarding out each story outline, each beat. Now, with those story outline beats, the story beats that you have, you can start thumbnailing each section out. And really, typically, establishing shots establish the overall view. One of the things that's going to help you managing how you thumbnail out your scene is going to be the next phase. And it kind of happens simultaneously with your thumbnails. And it's called camera. Let me see. Sorry, going down a little bit. Camera mapping. If you're once you've blocked out your sequences in your script, and you've designated each one, and now you're going to start thumbnailing. If it's a new location or any location, camera mapping is going to be the key. Teach the students to look at the location. If, let's say, it's a moon base, you know, maybe the moon base exterior, you know, looks like this. And this is circle, circle, you know, you know, maybe the moon base exterior looks like this, or maybe the interior, you have an interior shot. Let's say this is the interior shot, and I'm just doing a breakaway, meaning I'm looking at it, looking through the layout itself. If, let's say, you have a desk over here, and let's say there's another object, a refrigerator over here. Let's say there's a bed over here. Whatever that is, camera mapping will help establish how you're going to thumbnail your scenes out properly. Meaning, if you have an establishing shot, you have an exterior location. You've designed this exterior location. Now you can say your camera, let's say we'll do our cameras in blue, so we'd be clear with that. Your camera is outside. This is camera 1, and it's the establishing shot. Now we're designing, we're planning out a blueprint of how our camera is going to flow. Once we have an overall picture, or a down shot, a view of what location we're in, then once we have the establishing shot, let's say we're going out and we're slowly trucking in, we're going to indicate that in our thumbnails, or we're going to write a note saying slow truck in, establishing shot, slow truck in, and we're going to go into it. That would be camera 1 right over here. Then we go inside of this is going to take us inside the moon base. Then we're going to have another set of camera maps where we're like, maybe we're interior. We're going to go to interior, and we're going to have a camera here. Let's say we're going to have a camera here. And depending on where our characters are, let's say in this situation, the characters are, one character is here, and our other character is over here. Now, if we follow this rule where we have this character right there, that shot in a camera map would be here. Let's say this is camera 1. All right, and we're getting this angle. Let's say we've mapped this out. We go, okay, I want to start my camera here because we're having this character flow in, come in. And then if we want to say that maybe we cut to a close up of this character, you know, up here, camera 2, I'll just do a little thumbnail at the top here. Actually, we'll come over here since I have more room. Camera 2, let's say we have a shot of, you know, the character, or maybe this is camera 3. We have the character standing here looking, and it's a medium shot of the Macaulay standing there, doing something or walking. And that would be, let's say, shot 2. And that angle would be maybe here. And then we cut to then a close-up shot of the character. Maybe he's going to sneak up on him and he's getting all like excited. And so maybe once we cut to a shot of him where we're not seeing where this character is, then maybe we go to camera 3, which could be right here. And also, mind you, I've created so far I've created what I call the 180 rule line. I've stayed, which is a whole nother thing we can talk about, but I've stayed on this one side of the room for staging purposes, for setting up the character. And I haven't crossed over this 180 line by having a shot here looking towards them, and then camera 2 is then cutting in and cutting to a shot of this character. And then now I'm cutting back to a close-up of, let's see, this is 3. This is 3 here. Now, what I'm doing is, in my camera map, I'm establishing the 180, where I want things to go. I'm establishing in sequential order, experimenting with where I want things to flow in numerical order. I'm numbering them through 1 through 5 or 1 through 6 or whatever, how many shots you want for this sequence. And I'm doing an overall mapping to get an idea of where I can place my camera in a realistic setting. This is no different than if I was on a live action set and I had a scout go out, find a location that we need to shoot in based on the story. And then in the location, we are determining how we're going to set our shots up and what we're going to do. This is the same thing, but we're doing it in a visual format where it's a 2D drawing. And so we're executing this. You would do the same thing if you were doing this in 3D animation as well. You'd be doing the same thing if you're doing this in stop motion. You're setting up where your characters, your camera could potentially go and how it flows through the storytelling aspect. And then based on this, you can then reinforce it by doing your thumbnails. And then by doing this, it allows you to see the overall picture so that you're eliminating potential mistakes or boxing yourself in corners by using the camera mapping method along with your thumbnails. Is everyone following me?
I am. I think everybody is too. People in the chat
Okay.
let us know. But very interesting.
Okay.
Yeah. It also, I guess it helps you kind of narrow down what you need to focus on if you know what camera angles you're going to focus on. Like in this case, we don't have to worry about the bed because you don't have to draw anything with the bed. We're not focusing on anything in that sequence about the bed.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's no point. So what I've done here is and you're going to do this with each location. Now, I will map this out, and I've done it so many times in features. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to have to use this mapping method for this sequence that I'm doing reboarding for this movie, because there's a lot of complications in how we're restaging things. So I want to make sure, because we're doing a lot of fast cuts, I want to make sure that it flows well enough and that you don't get disoriented. You don't want to disorient the audience. You want your camera to have a nice rhythm and flow to it. If there's tension in the story, the challenge would be, how do you show that tension in your camera? Extreme close-ups. That's where understanding and studying camera shots and the variety of shots you could potentially use within a camera, and the combinations of choices. There's X amount of shots you could do, and then there's X amount of locations and lighting and drama, tone. All of those things play a role in how you want something to come across. If you have an extreme close-up like me looking at the camera like this, depending on how I'm lit or how my expression is, will determine, what mood I'm potentially trying to illustrate within that shot. If I'm like this, and hi, I'm excited, or I'm like this, and it's a shot, then that I'm in the same medium shot, that, with the expression, I am scared. Now, if I had more of a dramatic light on me would that elevate the intensity of that moment? Or if I have, all dark shadows, or if it's more somber colors. All of those things are going to kind of play into what you want to illustrate in your short story. So once you've done your camera mapping and your thumbnailing, and you've thumbnailed everything out, the next thing you're going to do is you're going to go into your first set of rough boards. And so rough boards is going to be your next phase. So with your thumbnails, you know, you got the close-up shot, you got the far away shot of the characters. You've got, you know, the two characters interacting with one another. Say 1, 2, 3, and you've got your camera mapping of the room. And you've got your camera setups. 1, 2, with your characters in there. So you've got camera mapping. Thumbs. Along with model sheets.
I'm going to be posting Travis's Discord invitation so you can join his Sketch to Animate Discord channel. He's always sharing more elaborate tips and advice on specific things such as rough boards, character development. So this is a glimpse into his process. He goes into much more details using his Sketch to Animate channel. So please check it out. I'm going to be dropping it here in the chat.
And the script, of course. These are the elements, the components. Oh, and your beat boards. So you've got your beat boards, right? This whole group is what you need in order to get start your rough boards. You've got a lot. There's a lot of what I'm trying to show you. There's a lot of buildup to getting to this level. So you've got to break these down. If you're teaching, you got to break these down into their separate components, giving enough time for each one. So there's enough. But the most important thing I always say, and I got some negative feedback one time because they said, we didn't get into the animation enough, or we didn't get enough boards. We spent too much time in story. I said, well, my argument to them was, we needed to make the story better. You don't want to jump too far ahead of yourself. And so that's part of the commitment. Like once you get into past a threshold of like being non-committal to a script, you got to have to lock it down at some point and then move on to the next thing. So story is always going to be the most important thing when developing anything that you have in this process. And because it's animation, we have that ability to rework stuff as much as we need. And, you know, case in point, I'm working on a film that I was working on 5 months ago, and they brought me back because they're into production and they've got about 10% of the story that they need to fix, and they needed some fixing even after they boarded it like 5 or 6 times, because they're always massaging and improving storytelling and things that aren't working. The beauty of animation, we can see it ahead of time as it's being built. So it's not like live action where we're shooting and hoping that everything's going to work in a tutorial and that we don't have to go back and spend more money on pickups somewhere else. Here, it's easy to kind of go back and forth and easily change something out and bring something back in through storyboarding. So these, again, are the collective things that you're going to need. Thumbnails, your thumbs, your model sheets, your camera mapping, along with your script and your beat boards. and you're ready to finally rough out your short film. And you're going to rough it out in sections. And once you've roughed out your storyboards, basically you're just making slightly more polished thumbnails. And your thumbnails might actually be good enough to where they could be your pose thumbs. You could blow those up. I always like to work really small and then later on blow them up and then put them, blow them up bigger and then put them to scale to the right format. Now I'm using Storyboard Pro right now just to kind of illustrate that point. But you can use TV Paint, but I use Storyboard Pro as well as Toon Harmony. I know other people actually use Clip Studio and Rough Animator, and there's others. Anything with a timeline basically can be used for storyboarding, literally. If you have a timeline and you have layers, you can use that program to storyboard, and you have a tool to draw and do tones. There's a number of places you can do. A lot of animators, a lot of story artists still use Photoshop and Bridge to create their own storyboards. So rough boards, once you go into rough boards, you're done with that. That's great. Now you can move on. What you want to do is get those boards up and you want to time it out. You want to take a look at it. Then you pitch this idea to the team, to the group, or to your teacher. And then that's where you get notes. You're going to get visual notes on your rough boards. And once you've gotten your notes for your rough boards, then of course you can take the notes and your rough boards and go into your final. And then once you go into your final boards are what you kind of notoriously have seen in many, productions of behind the scenes of how they did this or how they did that. Refining final boards can vary. It can be as clean as like Family Guy, where everything has to be on model, or Disenchantment. Every layout has to be clean. Every character has to be on model and clean, because the boards are literally the rough beginnings for production. They're going to literally copy verbatim what's in those boards. For features, I could be loosey-goosey. I don't have to be on model. I can have a rough indication of everything, because they're relying on the boards for the mood and tone and the overall camera angle, but they're going to refine it later on in there. So there's a lot of play in what type of production you're on in terms of how tight your final boards need to be. I always err on the caution of being slightly tighter, finding a loose, tight vibe, so that when you go into the real production, you're not going to be shocked by how detailed you have to be when you go on a show like Big Mouth or a show like Disenchantment. Then versus if you go to a show like I'm on with Super Pets, you're going to have a whole variety of styles that are with artists that are going to be different from one another. When you're on a show like Disenchantment, you kind of have to draw according to the model sheet. So even though you might have a different style of another story artist, you all tend to have to draw alike. It becomes more of a cleanup thing for that type of pipeline production. So, makes sense so far?
I think so. It makes sense to me. And
okay.
I am not an experienced animator, but we have a few here in the chat, so I hope it's making sense to all of you. Yes,
you have a few experienced animators in the room?
I think so. I mean, they are taking notes and asking really poignant questions, so they appear to be as experienced animators, or at least very advanced teachers. Jay Seltman here is asking, for short films, do you work at a frame rate higher than 30 frames per second?
No, I don't. I know Glenn Keane has done, a couple of short films where he did it, with Google. I think he did something, film idea that was like 60 frames per second. Typically 24 to 30 is going to be your go-to. 24, 25 frames, and then 30 frames per second is the typical area that I live in. I've been lately doing things at 30 frames per second and finding that fun, because I can do a lot more in-betweens and drawings to kind of get fluidity in there, as opposed to 24 frames per second. Now, some TV shows are at 12 frames per second, depending on how posy. Like Hanna-Barbera, it's a lot of moving holds with talking heads and blinking eyes, with limited angles in which the character can turn. They pop into one another. So you can have 12 frames per second to 24 frames per second to 30 frames per second. So hopefully that answers that question. I'm going to move forward now since we're limited on time, and I want to jump into, let's say now we've finalized our boards and we want to dive in to do a shot or a scene. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples. And now this is going into taking you out of the story and then taking you into the next phase of production. Once something goes into production, the thing that you're going to be doing is you're going to be doing animation, and you're going to be doing layouts and effects and all of these different things. So these storyboards are going to be sent to an artist or someone yourself. If you're going to do it yourself, you're going to break these boards into shots. They're separate scenes. And actually, I'll fast forward, I'll rewind just a little bit. Once you have your final boards, the thing you need to have is an animatic, which is you're going to edit and time those boards out to the length in which you feel is comfortable for this short film. So that's where you start. The director or whoever is doing this film, or if it's a team, somebody has to be in charge of directing and someone has to be in charge of editing these boards to get the timing of what they want for it to work. Now, a lot of times when we make these boards, we have a rough idea of how long it needs to be, but we really don't know. Sometimes, you know, if your limitation is 5 minutes, you can't go over a minute and a half. You know, well, okay, a minute and a half is my limit. So I have to board accordingly. I have to structure my story accordingly. If it's a 5 minute, you know, you have 5 minutes. Feature films are typically 85 minutes to 96, somewhere in between, for an animated short film. Why that is, it's just, it seems to be a comfortable length to tell an overall story and story arc when it's a big picture idea. If you look at any of the feature films, live action can run longer. You can have 2.5 hour epic films. But when you look at animation, typically a lot of that comes down to money and budget too. So you're going to be limited on your time. It's going to be very rare to see a very long animated film as opposed to like a long live action film that you might see in a lot of cases. So once you've built your animatic, meaning that animatic has timed out each shot, and if you understand, every time you cut from one thing to another, a different angle, that's a new shot, right? So if I'm looking at my thumbnails or looking back here at 1, this is shot 1. And then my next shot is shot 3. Those camera changes are my different camera shots. So those will be their own contained scenes that will be animated and going into production. So what we're going to talk about now is animating. This is going to lead us right into animation. I'm going to be skipping over a bunch of stuff because we don't have time for that. I wanted to go to the curriculum of the basics and understanding of animation and how it relates to story. So with that being said, we're going to go back to the bouncing ball. Are you guys with me so far? Like, I want to just go ahead and move forward to the bouncing ball and the flour sack. This is for the educators. This is a great way to kind of get the students' feet wet into learning how to animate according to the story. Now, I think it's relatable to this thing as well because, and I'll tell you why. You have a bouncing ball, and then you have the flour sack. Now, I've given a tutorial on this on my Back to Basics, which is a free tutorial that you guys can check out and critique. And if you like it, great. If you have feedback and you said, oh, you know, I think it would be better if it's like this, by all means. I always love feedback. But hopefully the type of feedback I like to hear is like, what am I missing and what else could I offer in terms of information? So you have two things. You have a ball, and then you have your flour sack. And then we always give the exercise. I did this at Disney when I first started. This is the first very basics of doing any type of animation, is the bouncing ball. But a lot of students will say, well, what's the point? Why? Why does any of these things matter? Well, the bouncing ball teaches you the principles of stretch and squash, and weight. With the ball, you can squash it depending on what material it is. If it's a bowling ball, if it's a tennis ball versus a ping pong ball versus a balloon, or let's say a gym ball, like a, you know, what do you call it? The when you hit each other with the ball. Those all have different dimensions, different weights, different flexibilities, and they're all going to have different types of bounces. This basic principle teaches you the idea of physics, how something squashes, how something stretches. Now in cartoon world, we can make anything as pliable or as hard as we choose. But when you first start out, you want to understand the differences from a physics standpoint so that you can apply that to an animation standpoint later on. So these things apply in that sense, that it's important. Now, to make it interesting, first things you want to do is understand the principles of arc. It also teaches you arcs. You know, a bouncing ball, depending on what angle it comes in, will determine how hard it's coming in, what angle it's coming in, the velocity, how hard it's gonna hit squash, and then stretch and bounce away. Now, again, if you apply, and I have these principles in some of my animation on my YouTube, if you apply a gym ball, really squishy gym ball, to that principle of velocity at the same angle, bouncing, and then you apply a bowling ball at the same velocity, you're going to see two varying differences in your stretching and squashing. And believe it or not, a bouncing ball is still does have a stretch and squash. If you see that in a high speed motion, it does actually squash a little bit and stretch a little bit. But it's almost impossible to see it with the naked eye. With a bouncing ball, it's more easily accessible and you can see it. But again, those things are going to arc differently. And we always talk about the principle of it squashing, stretching, coming to the apex, the point where gravity takes over, right? Because we live on Earth, so we have a certain gravity pull that it's going away. Every time it's going up, it's fighting against gravity, and depending on the velocity and the weight and the flexibility is going to determine how far it goes up and where it arcs to come back down. And then it's going to do a slight stretch and then squash again and then bounce up. And then eventually it's going to settle and get less and less and less over time. Now, this basic ball teaches you physics, weight distribution, arcs, stretching and squashing. All of those apply. And why does that apply to story? Well, if you can, as a fun exercise, you can turn your bouncing ball into an animated object. Just like in Cinderella or Sleeping Beauty, when you had the flour sack walking and being enchanted and walking over and they're making a cake, there's a certain type of movement for that inanimate object to come to life. So you can still create life within this character, within this bouncing ball, just by understanding the principles of stretch and squash and the bounce that we're teaching in this this lesson that I have right here, which is coming in and then hitting the ground and then arcing up. You can apply that to that. Now, the flour sack over here, I look at it as the flour sack has the same similar principles, but it's teaching you something different. It's teaching you about silhouette, posing, because you have now, I look at the body, I look at this as like, if you transfer this into, again, it could be, what kind of weight is it? Is it fully packed full of, let's say, oats, or does it have sand in it? All of those, the density of which it is going to also give it a different type of weight and feel. you can have a lot of fun with developing and creating your own little story to this particular thing. You can do it, you know, it teaches you a twist. If the character is twisting from one section to another, and it's twisting that way, it teaches you how to twist things properly. Again, it's stretching, squashing, it's teaching overlap. This is where you can, if you look at that example from Sleeping Beauty, I think someone was pointing it out with a flower sack being enchanted. You're seeing a walk cycle in place. You're seeing weight being distributed. You're also seeing arcs. Everything that we do, from a punch to a walk, is a series of arcs of ups and downs and moving forward and backwards. This shoulder has a arc, a limitation of arc. I can go this way, I can go this way. I'm talking about my arm. All of those things are a series of arcs. If you look at 3D animation, and if you broke let's say if you wanted to put to this flower sack here, if you wanted to put a bone structure in it, you could say, okay, I have maybe a pivot point here, a pivot point here, maybe a pivot point here, here, and here, and then one here. And I do the same for this. These are my bone structures underneath. Now I'm giving myself a point of where things are moving. If I wanted to, let's say, have this character go this way and then down this way, and then put this foot up like this. Do you see what's going on here? It looks like almost like a human.
Yeah.
I am actually just applying the flower sack to make sure I get this correct. I'm just showing you different ways to look at the concept of what a flower sack does. You know, if this is the flower sack, in a 2D sense, I'm still imagining a structure to the character, even if it's not, it doesn't have a bone in it. Even like an octopus or anything else, everything has a flow to it. The principle of this flower sack brings things to life. It gives you the ability to anthropomorphify or humanize the character, give it a personality, because now you've got more flexibility. It's not a bouncing ball anymore. Now you can do twists, you can do turns. Now you can do that. You're limited with the bouncing ball, but now you can do a little bit more by this, and you can give a story to it. You can have maybe the flower sack is being tossed, or if you want the flower sack to come to life, maybe that, like somebody was saying the other day when I was doing my prompts, they're saying, hey, animate a flower sack walking, but it's got a string loose and it's slowly losing its sand as it's going. Well, what would that look like as the flower sack is walking? Well, that's a fun little exercise you could do for your students, where they have a full sack walking, but it's losing its sand along the way, or its flour, whatever's in it. And as it's going, it's getting looser and looser and less structure to it and more overlappy, until it finally just kind of becomes cloth and falls to the ground. That could be a fun exercise in itself that kind of tells a story. Now, the best example I give to anyone else, like, why does the flower sack and the ball really matter together? Those two principles are the building blocks for any character. You know, the best example I give, and I give it with a squirrel, and I'll show you the example here. let's see, I will do next drawing. I'll go up and we'll draw a flour sack just in terms of a visual reference. And then a ball. Now, can you see already where I'm going with this? With just seeing a ball and a flour sack together? Elizabeth, can you see where I'm going with this?
I do.
Okay. So if I was to take this and just apply a little bit of character.
Bristol is saying that reminds me of drunk Baymax from Big Hero 6, low battery. I haven't seen Big Hero 6. I should check it out.
Oh, you haven't seen it?
No.
Big Hero?
Mm-mm.
Oh, it's great. It's a great film.
Yeah, a lot of friends have recommended it's supposed to be right up my alley, and I haven't checked it out. Well, thank you for sharing all these excellent resources with us today, Travis. We are documenting everything. I will be updating today's lesson on the blog so that you can see the culmination of all the 3 classes. Travis's goal really was to walk us through, the very basics of animation today. He said 2 hours. I don't know that you're gonna have it in you to do some animation demo.
What time is it right now? Oh, it's 1:50. Now we can go over a little bit more. Everyone just have to, I can go on my time when it comes to the developing the story. It's my live stream. If I go a little late, I'll go a little late. But I want to make sure that you guys are okay with me just going a little bit longer.
I'm okay. I want you to be very pleased with your series, and we have students here who are really enjoying it. So I definitely want you to continue if you feel like it.
So again, okay, that sounds awesome. I will get a couple of points across here. So this right here is taking the ball and the flour sack and putting it into a character. It's the basic construct for anything. A human, it could be as like a human character. If this is the flour sack and a ball, well, now if you apply character to it, human,
Thank you, Carlos Cuenta. He's from Spain, so he's going to have to leave and continue enjoying this later on YouTube. For those of you who have to leave for whatever reason, we will be uploading this this class right after this on YouTube so that you can enjoy it for later viewing. We have all 3 episodes there, so you can start from the beginning. But we're loving it, and we're getting really good feedback here, Travis. So,
oh, that's great. That's awesome. So essentially, I'm just showing you how you can apply anything to this whole flour sack concept. Let me do this. Change this real quick. So in a really quick nutshell, like this is, you know, taking that principle and applying it. Everything applies to that. Now, how does that look in animation? I have a quick example to share with you here. And let's see if I can get this to make sure we got this one. I'm going to put this on a loop. The next one.
Wait, what, Travis? Is that a mouse I'm hearing? I'm hearing a mouse, Travis.
Right just now? Or
Yes,
right now?
I heard the mouse click and my heart stopped. You know how I feel about the mouse?
You mean a mouse?
Yes, you're clicking in a mouse in a Wacom webinar. Stick to your pen.
Oh, next to my pen? No, it's off to the right. Are you talking about you can hear my clicking of my mouse?
I can click your mouse clicking, and yeah,
oh wow,
we're down with the mouse.
We're down with the mouse.
We don't like the
mouse.
mouse.
All right, so here, look.
Really lost my sarcasm, Bristol. He did not get it.
Oh wow. You know what it is? It's probably because my mic was too close. So this is an example of doing a bouncing ball exercise or flour sack exercise. Very simple. He bounces, he jumps across. This is one way you can apply overlap in design. Now, the best example, and I have a really good example of how this matters in one of my live streams, and I'll try to find the right live stream so that I can show it. But I also have it in why bouncing ball matters. The second one I have as an example that kind of gives you how it translates in animation to an actual character, like the squirrel, like I've just showed you. I'm going to go ahead and put this in motion here. Make sure that's on loop, and just watch, and we'll talk about it as it goes through. So this is just a quick run, and it's just going to keep looping. Do you see how, if you imagine the head as the bouncing ball, like bouncing up and down, which I don't have illustrating here, but I could easily. I wanted to illustrate how the flour sack applies to the locomotion of, let's say, a squirrel run. And the overlapping actions that you see are happening in here right now is, like, for instance, the tail and the head are reacting to the overall movement of the flour sack. Like the top of the flour sack could be the chest, and the back of the flour sack is the butt of the squirrel. And so you're seeing this in place. Now, I don't know if this is playing in real time, because it might be, since it's streaming, it could be jittery, but you'll have examples of this to share on the blog that you can download and view. But I'll just break through this really quick. How it's quickly just bending and flexing, and this is just the flour sack. And now I've applied that, and it's going into a squirrel that's jumping and leaping. And I'm using the same principles that I've learned in the flour sack exercises and applying them now to the squirrel. And in this case, the squirrel, you'll see at the top right here, this would be the bouncing ball portion. Then you have another thing that we can talk about some other day. Maybe we'll do another web series on just character animating and character designing, where we can really focus in on overlaps, like the tail. How does the S curve work? How does the tail work with the overall movement of the squirrel? Or we could even go into a series of body mechanics. How does a quadruped work versus a bipedal character? But I just wanted to go through the basics. And Elizabeth, you're right. We're probably not going to have time for me to animate a full-on character, but I have animation principles here that apply, that I have at least examples to share with people.
I'll just have to bring you back next year for a full-on character class.
Yeah, well, any questions? I want to be able to answer some questions now for people. And remember, when you get into story, once you've fleshed out your story, you've got an edited animatic with your boards, this is where the fun begins. This is when you can start really having fun with your character movement. And remember, your character animation is always going to be dictated by the story you're telling within your storyboards. The more information you can flesh out in your storyboards, the better your final production will be for your animation. That I think is the key right there.
Well, thank you for showing us the flower and sack example. Luca has just shared that he's very thankful he wasn't able to understand the flower and sack before this class. So thank you so much for showing it to us and how it works. I do have a couple of questions.
Sure, let's do it.
Jaime Carrillo says, how do you approach animating slow motion action?
Well, you basically have to still use the same principles. If you're going at 24 frames per second, you know that if there's an action going, if I'm punching at this speed, then all you're doing really is you're adding more drawings in betweens in to kind of emulate that slow motion. Can you see me moving my fists very slowly?
Yes.
Right. So but if I'm doing this and this is normal speed, basically whatever scene length of that scene you're doing, if you're about to punch and then you go into slow motion, one way to kind of show a fast to slow motion is you start the punch and you cut slowly, and then you just basically, it's adding more in betweens. Really, that's what it comes down to. Keeping the same principle of this arc and the action that you want, you're just simply slowing it down, and you're seeing more of the frame rate, the more of the images, the more of the movement in between, if that makes sense. And this, let's say it would be like if you took a high speed film and you knocked it down to, if you're shooting at 60 frames per second and I'm doing all of those in betweens, but now I'm playing at 24 frames per second. That's a one-way example of showing like how quickly, like if you're animating at 60 frames per second, but then you play it back at 24, it's going to be super slow. It's going to slow down. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So you're just adding more in-betweens to that action.
Now I have another question here from Jay Siltman. How many passes would you take for Disney when animating a quick movement by a character?
I'm sorry, I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing at the fact that I've had so many different directors, and some of them are picky, some of them are not. Let's use my brother as an example. He was my director on Brother Bear. If I part of getting less notes is getting better communication in the beginning. The better you are at figuring out what the director wants before you get a scene issued versus the art, it's the art. I like it. This is where personalities and communication and team building go into effect. If you go into a room and they're issuing you a scene, know what questions to ask the director specifically. If you have a director that doesn't know what they want, that understand that you have to come in with more questions to ask to kind of nail down the person. I would be even as far as to say, hey, to the director, hey, can I share with you some thumbnails before I go into the animation? I want to be clear that I am going to deliver to them exactly what they want. I get notes all the time, in my storyboards especially, but I also have a director that's picky. So he's always going to be giving me more notes. I don't take it personally because I know he's just simply always trying to improve what is already existing there, or he wants to try a different way of doing things. So one way to do to do it is ask clear questions in the beginning. If you don't have clear questions, ask if you could do a thumbnail pass and share with them before you go into what it is that you want. So if this character, let's say, is walking or jumping, I might, do a series where I'm having the character standing right here, then he, jumps up like so, and then, maybe he's landing here. And I'm thumbnailing the scene out. So I got 1, 2, 3, 4. And let's say this is the character jumping towards camera. I might go back to the director and say, hey, how does this look to you? Here's our composition. Here's our shot. He's going to jump towards camera, and then he's going to jump and run past camera. How do you like that? The director might go, oh, I like that, but maybe not. Maybe have him, roll into the scene. And then jump. So, maybe the character rolls into scene and then jumps up. What I'm doing here is simple and thumbnaily as this gets. I'm establishing a direction, and I'm getting out of the director what exactly they want. What you don't want is to walk away clueless. And don't be afraid to ask questions. Go, I don't understand. Can you maybe help me explain better? Or if they say, I really don't know what I want, can you go thumbnail it out and maybe let's explore that? Believe me, the more engaging you are with the other person and asking the right questions, the better off you're going to be in getting the right thing that you want in the end. Now, you can give them exactly what you want and they still come back with notes. And don't fret, that's okay. You've done your due diligence at least to become a good communicator, and also go in there with notes. Make sure you always have a pencil and paper with you, writing notes down. If you had the scene, enough time to look at the scene, write your questions down. And then listen, first things first, listen to what the director wants. If you look at your list and he's answered some of those questions that you already had, great. If he hasn't, go, hey, I got a couple of questions to ask, A, B, and C. And then he'll go, no, I want this, I want that. Write them down. Again, if you want to have a thumbnail session, typically what we would do is I would then have the director issue me something. I would go back. I would typically have a supervisor. I would sit down with that supervisor and thumbnail my thing out with them, because a lot of times the supervisor might be in the same room with you at the same time. Let's say I'm working on Stitch. Alex Cooper-Schmidt's my supervisor, which he was, and Chris Sanders and Dean Dubois are issuing me a scene, or Chris is issuing me a scene, and Alex would be in the room as I'm getting the scene issued, because Alex also has the choice on what scenes I get because he's the supervisor. And then if there's any questions that are to be asked, I'll go back a lot of times with the supervisor and sit down with him and troubleshoot what needs to happen. And then we can go in and I can go off into the room with Aaron. It was very easy because I knew who he was and I kind of knew what he wanted. And at that point, this was the last film that we did for Florida. And I had already been working at the studio for 14 years. So everyone at that studio were like a well-oiled machine. We knew, we could anticipate what each other's thoughts were, what we were going to do. I think that's what made our studio so good, is because we had worked on so many films together. We were comfortable. We already knew what each other wanted. So typically we didn't have a lot of revisions, and because of that, we might have had more arguments because we were comfortable with one another. But that is the thing. Typically nowadays, you're a one-off studio, or you make a production and you're not with the studio more than that production. Those key things that I told you are going to be really important for you to have under your tool belt to being a better artist and to be able to deliver something. Because beyond all of this, I go back to the team playing thing. This is a group effort. When you go into actual production, you are going to be with a team of artists. And actually, we can not share my screen anymore. Should I just stop sharing? I'll just stop sharing.
Yeah, we want to see you. We want to.
Yeah.
I want to also just tell you that we're getting a lot of comments here. Really happy for your class. They're suggesting that Wacom should sponsor Sketch to Animate episodes. So that'd be really cool. Thank you so much for sharing this wealth of information. I know you want you to cover a really important side of animation, which was storytelling, something that a lot of people who just want to jump into animation and learning the software tend to forget. And you kind of grounded us back to the importance of story. I want to thank you for that, because I myself had forgotten about just how fun it is to brainstorm, and those exercises really develop really charismatic. I mean, I fell in love with Tyson and the little characters that you created for us. So I want to thank you for showing us through this exercise just how much creative block can be fought through these exercises. And my favorite part was obviously the character development and how it helped develop story. I would love to bring you back to just focusing on that, because a lot of people here enjoyed your drawing skills. They enjoyed how you explained character development. And I think that there needs to be so much more explored in that realm. So I want to first of all thank you. There are some questions here that were unanswered. I'm going to encourage everybody to please join Travis's Sketch to Animate.
We've got time to answer a couple more. You don't have to rush on it's all on you guys right now. Like 2:30, if we go to 2:30, then that's fine.
We do have to wrap up. We do have other things to do as a team. We are going to definitely, I'm going to be updating the blog today, and I'm going to be speaking to my team about bringing Travis back for a second round, because I do believe we have a really interesting topic here that needs to be explored way further. And we want to thank the audience for having such great questions. And Travis, thank you for developing, this class from scratch for us, because I had seen you during Cartoon Crunch, and I had seen your style of mentoring, and that's exactly why I wanted to bring you on to explore what you had to do, with Sketch to Animate. I want to continue to support Sketch to Animate, and I want you all to please follow his channel. I've shared all of his information here. Travis, I guess this is not goodbye. This is going to be a ... because we're going to
I can follow up with that, saying thank you, Elizabeth and Tom and Mark and everybody that were involved with having me be a part of this. And, I got to thank my brother too, because, without him encouraging me to do what I'm doing, you guys wouldn't know who I was. I've been in this industry 30 years, but still a virtual unknown to the rest of the world, because we're very behind the scenes in what we do. And unless we promote and good at self-promotion, you're never going to really know who we are. We're the silent workers behind the movies that you see and love. I think it would be awesome. Now, this is something that I'm doing. You love Tyson and Winger. It'd be great if we actually developed an actual short that we could put in film festivals, or even do as a short series for Wacom itself. But that's just an idea.
Well, we're going to run it by the team. I think it's wonderful. And yeah, we also got to know you because of Cartoon Crunch, and thanks to our wonderful friend, Mike Morris, who...
Yes, I have to thank Mike Morris as well. Mike, if you're out there, you're in Crunch right now. I know. I tried to talk to him the other day. He was busy directing a show. Yeah, thank you very much for him for doing what he's doing. And check out the Cartoon Crunch, because I really think thankfully that you guys, it was a huge success in terms of the way it went off, and the final result was really the icing on the cake to me. Look at the final shorts and know that these people did not know each other before any of this.
And none of them are professional animators. They're all students. There was one that was doing.
Yeah, but again, they didn't know each other. They used the team building principles that I'm talking about, and they were able to come together from different countries, different parts of the world to make that thing happen. So it's doable. It's very possible to make fun, creative, compelling stories with teams of people. So just remember, team, it's the we, not I, when it comes to animation. Most instances. So that's,
every story begins with a sketch and a team. You have to add that there. A good team
and a team
and a team to bounce ideas off of. Thank you so much, Travis. I love the idea of pushing the story of Tyson and Winger further. I will talk to you later. And thank you to everybody, my team, for supporting us in these 3 weeks. Thank you, Tom, Peter, Melissa, Shireen, and everybody. This is also my last webinar of the year. I won't be hosting another one until next year. So a big wrap up with a good friend. Thank you so much, Travis.
Well, that's only 2 weeks away, right?
I know, but I've done
not until next year, 2 weeks away. I think we're all looking forward to 2021.
I think it's looking hopeful, and I'm very excited to what we have stored. Please stay tuned on the Wacom channels. And
I don't want to. And I wanted to just edit myself. I said Mark and not Peter, so I apologize.
It's Peter. Yes. It is Peter, the amazing Peter.
Yes.
All
Thank you, Peter.
It is a wrap. Thank you so much for joining us in this journey. Thank you, Travis. Merry holidays, everybody, too. Enjoy your time off.
Be safe.
It's a wrap.
Take care.
Take care. Thank you.